Oh, she just like looks at him.
Hi.
My name's Stephanie, and I'm letter A.
My name's Megan, and I'm E.
I'm Stephanie, and I'm B.
I'm Julianne, and I'm A.
I'm JD, and I'm D.
And I'm Jen, and I'm C.
Yes. Okay. So.
Maybe pulling up the page.
Oh yeah, with the thing on it.
Yeah.
With the chart.
So we should talk about what our influences, or
Yes.
what influences affect our teaching.
Mm-hmm. So the first one is past academic experiences. So to teach as we were taught.
So my upbringing, I was taught with a lot of, I think it's referred to as traditional teaching, where teachers just give you like algorithms for math, and they expect you to follow those exact ways to like add things together or multiply. Or like they'll just give you lists of spelling words to memorize. But research has shown that students who kind of grapple with these, or grapple to understand conceptually how the math works and come up with their own invented strategies is like a better way to learn. So I think I think they could get in my way, like the way I was taught. To get in my way, because sometimes I'll want to just tell students how to do something instead of just let them kind of learn for themselves.
Yeah. Definitely feel the same on that one. Because, like, it's also still the way that I prefer to learn. Like, given the choice, like, even though, like, I'm reading all these studies down, I'm like, no, like, student-led learning is, like, the best, like, deepest type of learning. But I'm still like, no, just lecture at me. Like, and that's, like, a hard
That's
thing
just
for
how
me to
you
get
learn.
over. Yeah. You're like, no, like, these kids aren't going to learn best if I just lecture at them.
Right.
Like, that's definitely something that I'm going to, like, still have to work on getting over.
I think it really does depend on approach, because I did have a math teacher kind of similar who, well, what he would do was just give us problems. He wouldn't lecture at us. He would just give us problems, and then he'd go sit at his desk. So it was kind of student-led, because we all had to, like, collaborate with each other to find answers to whatever math and algebra he'd given us. But, I mean, he wasn't lecturing at all. He was just sitting in the corner of his class. So, like, in a way, that's the kind of teacher I hope not to emanate. Just because we didn't get any help at all. So.
Yeah, I feel like it can go both ways. Like for me, when I look at my past English teachers, I see a lot of positive things, and so it's stuff that I want to like have in my own classroom. And so, as like a positive result, it'd be like I want to like teach like how they taught me, and so obviously it can go either way.
I feel like it does vary, like, the subjects that you're teaching, too. Because, like, for, like, reading, you can't really lecture on how to read. You kind of have to let them do it themselves. But, like, for math or science, you have to teach them, like, the steps or whatever, and they'll, like, learn better. But, yeah, I think it definitely varies.
Yeah. And the next one is educational training. Teachers who are taught to teach.
How many of us are, like, in Woodring right now?
I am. I mean.
Okay, so we have, like, probably have a good mix of, like, whatever your classes are doing right now that would affect your future teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's definitely been interesting being taught how to teach, you know? It's like, which I was excited to get this new perspective on being a student and being in the classroom. And I think, I don't know, I feel really blessed that, like, we're here in this program and getting this great education and being, like, receiving all these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn and a lot that I didn't know.
Yeah.
That I hope to bring into future classrooms. Things that I didn't even think about, like how to address your students. Like, you don't want to, you know, just random little things that are something like, oh, this is actually really important for me to be processing and thinking about.
I remember one of the first things I think I was taught in Woodring was, like, to practice the teacher smile.
Yeah.
Like, the half smile where you're just, like, just resting your face. But, I mean, it does have a really big influence on your students. Also really like how a lot of the teachers, or a lot of the professors here have been teachers before, so they actually have that background experience with children. Right. And then they can say, like, oh, I used this in the classroom, and this is how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then And there's colleagues and administrators, so teach as others teach and as we are required to teach.
That's going to be a very interesting one to figure out, like how in whatever school district we're in, what the curriculum is, and how we're supposed to teach that curriculum, and how to work together with our colleagues. Even maybe like you have a colleague you don't agree with how they do things, but then you have their past students in your class, and you have to learn how to collaborate and figure out like what works best and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It'll definitely be interesting to figure that piece of it out.
I know I definitely focused on the administration part of this more than the colleagues part, and just I thought it would be like a damper on my ability to teach students, because I know even at like the high school that I went to, I mean you can see the interactions between the admin and the teachers, and like when the teachers are frustrated with the admin and why, and just the idea of like student-led discovery and how it's not necessarily oriented toward the like HISB and like standardized tests and whatever. But that's what the admin's looking for, is those high test scores. So trying to find the balance between like, hey, like these are my administrators and like I work for these people, and so I need to give them the results that they're looking for. But also, like I also want my students to learn and to learn in the best way possible. And if the best way for them to learn is student-led learning, like that's what I want to give them.
Yeah.
So I think that was like something that I kind of foresee as being like a damper on my ability to like, teach students, so that balance.
And then the next one is changes in teaching situations. Then the result is adjusting teaching to new school level or new students. And I feel like when I was thinking about that, I was thinking like sometimes halfway through the year, like some parts of the year, like a new student will come in, and then just having to like figure out how to accommodate that student, like catch them up. And so that's definitely an influence, and it can be negative, but then also it can be positive because like that new student can bring like just new insight to the classroom.
I think that's what's exciting about going into this career, is that each year you get a whole new group of faces, and they're going to bring different things to every lesson. Even if it's like essentially the same plan, the discussions are going to be completely different every year. The things that stick out are going to be different. It's just going to be a different group, and like different challenges and different like exciting leaps. And I think that's the part I don't know that I love about teachers, that they can, like some of the best ones that I've had just are so flexible and can adjust, and
That's good. Use the same word, flexible.
Yeah.
That will be really important, because I mean it's boring and just not helpful when you're stick with only one strategy and you're not really adapting to whatever student needs are.
yeah.
And also, we don't know where we'll be hired as teachers.
Exactly.
And I know the book talked about that some like ELL concentrations can be higher in certain districts or areas than others, and just the flexibility. Agree with that.
Yeah.
Just be ready for anything.
I really like the point that you just brought up about how it's gonna like change from like year to year depending on what students you get. But like if you're teaching like a biology class in high school, I mean you're gonna get that same like classroom 4 different times. Like you're gonna have 4 different classes of biology in a day.
Yeah.
So like there's that like hiccup type deal too.
That's interesting.
And the next one is materials. So like how does that influence us?
Again, some schools might have more support than other ones with parents or resources.
I'll link this one to community asset mapping.
This kind of goes with the flexibility too. I just remember reading through Yvonne's experiences, and the one school, I think in Mexico City that she was in, where they just had limited supplies, but she was trying to kind of change how they taught things. And you just kind of have to work with what you've got and make it work to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
Something I brought up was like just how students will take the curriculum. Like some of them will really enjoy it, some of them just won't. So like being able to be flexible with that and just like I guess accommodate to those students who may not like click with the curriculum as well as other students.
Right. Yeah. That was like the neatest thing about Yvonne's experience, is that like she was always trying to figure out like what the students' needs were, and like was constantly like striving to meet them, and that's super cool because I feel like we don't see that often with like teachers being like, okay, what do you guys want to learn? Like, she went to the classroom and was like, what English do you guys need to learn in order to, like, succeed? And, like, they told her, and she based her curriculum off of that. And, like, obviously we can't do that with, like, high school and, like, junior high students or elementary because, like, there's set curriculum, but it was just cool to see her, like, trying to find what her students really needed. And then legislation. So how do we, like, the result of ensuring that students meet the requirements of state and federal legislation?
That could definitely hinder a teacher's ability to teach because they want to meet standards. I know the book talked a lot about teaching to the test instead of, again, teaching to what the students actually need.
Teaching to get those scores, really. I mean, that's just a lot of pressure to think about, like, that you have to juggle, like, how am I going to best adapt and, like, help my students be engaged with also getting all the scores they need to, like, move on, because, I mean, those were kind of heavy penalties that they talked about if you didn't get those scores.
Yeah, like shutting down a school.
Right.
That one was, I was like, wait, can you do that? That's crazy.
Not even losing the job, like, school.
Right.
Yeah,
In
and I
that
don't
job.
understand how that would even benefit anybody. Like, unless the school, nobody took it seriously, and none of the staff and faculty, they just showed up and let the kids do whatever they wanted. But
Right.
where are those students supposed to go then? Like, what sort of challenges do their families face if they go, like, so far out of the district? Like, what happens then?
Yeah.
Do you all know if like a school is shut down, if like the majority of their teachers are not like raising scores? Like, what if they have a handful of teachers who are doing really well, but everybody else is just kind of, well, not?
I don't know.
Money question?
Yes.
Yeah, like what happens to those good teachers? You got it.
I mean, what does it take to have a whole school shut down?
So you started one. Nice. Yeah, totally. Well, it says that like several years of poor performance, but it doesn't say like if the whole school has poor performance or like only like
What percentage?
of the classes are like failing. Yeah, that's good.
And it just, hurts like the struggling students more, legislation, because they have teachers start to report them differently. Just like ELLs are just reported differently, so they, I don't know, kind of seems like they kind of are segregated more.
Right.
So. Should we move on to part 2?
Yeah, this is like the No Child Left Behind and the English Only laws.
Yeah.
I feel like I only could think of like negative things that those were doing for ELL students. Just because I feel like it's called like No Child Left Behind, but I feel like they were getting left behind. Just because like they were just pushing so hard for them to like pass these tests. But like the thing was saying like it takes like 4 to 7 years for them to learn a language when like they're like, oh, like come into the classroom and like in 1 year you have this test that you have to pass to move on.
Yeah, I think that the intent was probably good, but there wasn't quality research done into making sure that those students would be well taken care of and able to pass these tests.
Because I believe, like you said, like the honest intent of the No Child Left Behind and the English Only laws is to have all the students be able to pass these tests. That's the honest intent, like originally behind them. I mean, when they realized it wasn't working, like it should have changed faster.
Yeah.
But that intent behind it was the biggest thing that I got out of it.
We kind of did talk about Yvonne earlier, just how she did adapt her teaching to whatever her students were in need of. And I thought it was interesting when she talked about just that, you know, a lot of the curriculum that she was provided with, it wasn't really applicable, and there was like a complete disconnect between like the actual language and the worksheets. I mean, because she obviously loves speaking Spanish and she loves like language acquisition, but like I thought it was really interesting that she was so shocked that her students couldn't really share that passion just because the way they were learning was not really in their best interests.
Yeah. She was just inspiring. Like, it was cool how she would just drop her job and, like, go overseas to teach just so she could learn more, to, like, be more prepared.
How long was she? Was it a year that she went abroad? Or
She went several times.
Yeah.
She went to Mexico 3 times, I think. And, like, she took her kids with her at one point. Like, she just was super dedicated, which is really cool.
just a good example for us, like in the future, like how far would we be willing to go to really provide our students with everything?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then chapter 4, we had A.
Yes.
And we talked about what JD talked about last week, a little bit, zone of proximal. Didn't you talk about that a little bit? Yeah. That we had that, and then personal invention and social convention. They're kind of self-explanatory. Yeah.
Like the zone of proximal development was like the difference between what a learner can do and versus like what they can do with help. I think is the basic understanding of it.
Right.
But yeah, it was just interesting because then now you can like think back on your own experiences of like, okay, what would my area be, and like what is just over the line.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I had B. And so I had the term spontaneous concepts and scientific. And spontaneous is just like the everyday interactions that we can learn from. So it's kind of like acquiring language versus learning that we talked about last week. So like in the book, it talked about how cars are like integrated every day because we might drive every day or we see cars on the road every day. So we come to learn them naturally without needing someone to teach us what a car is. So that's spontaneous. And then scientific is like the learned atmosphere, things you learn in school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had C, and I had to explain the role of the teacher as a direct instruction and as modeling. Like those are kind of self-explanatory, like direct instructions. They're really the teacher like telling the students the information, like how to do stuff. And the modeling is like them showing them how to do it more than just like speaking at them. And I had grammatical competence, which is the knowledge of a language that allows us to get and give information about the world. And there's like 4 main focuses, which is phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. And that's like the sound system, the knowledge of structure of the words, the way that English conveys meanings, and like how, like, and yeah, just like words and all that. And
I had D, which was guided instruction and scaffolding, which goes a lot with the zone of proximal development. As my scaffolding, that is how you help students reach that next level. This section talked about how to best do that with ELLs, and the book really recommended the use of visual scaffolds like graphs and maps and charts, just a way to help students like visualize things. And this part of the chapter also talked about because you can use like more proficient students to scaffold other students. So this brought up a group of 3 girls. I think they were all Hmong girls, and one of them was very proficient in English. And the other 2 had just come to the country within the last year, so they were a lot behind. And they worked on a reading assignment together. And the teacher didn't step in at all; she just observed them working together. And all 3 of them would be reading out loud together. And if the other 2 came to a word that they didn't understand, they'd point it out to the more proficient girl, who would then describe it to them in their own language. And that in itself was just helping those that peer guidance to help the other 2 girls those more words, and they work through this whole assignment. So things like that or how you can use scaffolding for EL students.
And mine was talking about modeling and like strategies to use the grammatical competence and the communicative competence, and what kind of strategies. Let's go back because I always erase the questions when I post it. What kind of strategies help like developing a second language or like inhibit the learning of a second language? So mine was just going through some of those strategies, and I picked out a couple that I know like when I took like Intro to Spanish type classes really like, helped me learn to communicate, or ones that didn't work, such as like paraphrasing. Like if you don't know the word, like try and describe it until somebody can give you the word, like the professor or your neighbor. So like if you don't know like the word dog, you're like, oh, you know, the big fluffy animal that runs around with a tail. Like, oh yeah, dog. Like, yeah, that one. So like paraphrasing, or even just throwing in your own language word for that word. If you're speaking in Spanish, but you say dog because you just don't know the word. And by context, they normally know the word and can give it to you. But then, like with communicative stuff, you run into issues with like idioms, where I think you used the word, you used like a phrase in English that was just
It's raining cats and dogs.
something like that. But like the direct translation isn't like the phrase that they use for that, so it's like really weird to hear, and they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So like those ones can really hinder language learning, like idioms. And the baseline was just like if all else fails, like the student can just avoid using the word or that phrasing or that grammatical structure. Which I mean, I find myself doing with even my native language, like English. If I don't know if I'm using the correct tense of the word or whatever, I'll just restructure my sentence so I don't have to use it, right? Which was one that like really hit home for me because I was like, wow, like I have to do this in my own language. I can't imagine like having to do this in another one.
Right.
So, but I know there were a bunch more, but it was just some of the strategies that I felt were most applicable and that you could watch out for the EL students.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say it was interesting to like see like all those strategies actually played out in that video that she sent us as well. Like there was one example where the kids were reading a biography, and it must have said something in there about like how there was a house near this creek and there was a dog and all these other words, but the kids didn't know what a creek was. But because they had a picture of this whole image, they were able to just like pick it out of context.
Right.
So just like that, they can make that connection through like what you were saying, the visual interpretations. That was really cool to see.
Yeah.
I also had, I forgot about this one, cognitive apprenticeship in my vocab words. So for ELLs, they can acquire new information by having like a mentor. So a proficient English speaker is kind of, you know, their mentor, and they're the apprentice under them. And this just gives them like a purpose to actually learn the language, because they'll be able to interact and communicate with their mentor, and it kind of gives them like value in learning and being part of this culture.
Would that be something that you would like, pair students up together, like one as a mentor and the other as an apprentice, or how did they model that in the book?
Well, it talked about like Yvonne's experience of going over to Mexico City. Somewhere in Mexico, yeah. So by her, I mean, it didn't talk about, I guess, the mentor part, but by her going into the culture and just giving meaning to learning the language kind of helped her immerse herself in it. I guess I can't think of an example.
Yeah.
But I think that would work, pairing like a stronger speaker with someone that needs a little more help. That person could like scaffold for that other student.
Kind of like what the book was talking about in my section with the 3 Hmong girls working together.
Well, just because you are increasing like the student interaction, and they'll learn to like share ideas and maybe even argue over different opinions, and it's just helpful for like future group projects or something. They have those skills to actually move forward from.
one thing that Julian and I had was the difference between competence and performance, and that competence was that it's like what the students can do at their best ability. Like it kind of has to go with like the proximal development, like the zone of that. But then performance was like how, like what they actually do. And so I was just kind of wondering, like, I don't know if you thought about this, Julian, but like what teachers mostly grade off of, like if they grade off of the performance or the competence. And like I think it was kind of saying like performance is what they should be looking at because that's what the student's actually doing. But then I don't know.
I was under the impression that like if the teacher doesn't understand like how the context is affecting the student, like if they aren't really looking in depth at whatever situation the student is in, they'll grade it more on performance. I mean, I'm just like, even I myself, I struggle talking in English sometimes, and I'm a native English speaker.
Yeah.
So I know that the way I like react in discussions is not really reflective of everything that goes on inside my head. But you would hope that the teacher would understand that, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, what are all your thoughts, do you think?
Well, like in some of the things that it said in the book that, or in the article that would like affect the performance was like just like fatigue or like shyness or just lack of confidence. And so I guess my question was just like how, when you're a teacher, like how do you, how do you know when, like, if you should be grading off of like all competence or like performance, like how do you know the balance of like those two? Like you don't want to be too lenient and be like, oh, maybe they were just tired today and like that's why they didn't do good. But I don't know.
I think it is important too to have like kind of a moment to be able to check in with each student as they come in the door, just so you have like some sort of gauge of where they're at that day. But yeah, I mean, I think you can be lenient to an extent. I don't know. Like, thinking about that, there was a kid in a kindergarten class that I worked in, and he was having a very bad day. And just from the moment he walked in the room, he was not having a good day. And they every day had to do this, like, little writing assignment. They'd draw a picture and have to write, like, the sentence-long story of what their picture was. It was really cute. But he, like, ripped up page after page after page. Like, he just couldn't do it that day. And he ended up having to stay in for recess to get his work done, which I don't think I personally would have done. But it was, like, everything was going wrong, and he kept, like, fighting other children, and it was a mess. But when he was sitting down during recess, myself and his actual teacher were in there, and he finally said, like, I'm just sad and I'm mad because this happened this weekend. It was totally valid, and I felt so bad for him. Like, I mean, they don't really get graded on that work, but at the same time, I feel like any kid who had that situation over the weekend and said, like, hey, I can't do it today, I would be able to be like, you know what, we'll figure it out.
Right.
I think to an extent, like, it's okay to make things work in order to help students succeed.
Be aware. Yeah, it really probably comes down to being aware of your
Yeah.
students and
Yeah.
like really knowing them.
Yeah, getting to know them. Like that personal relationship is important.
Totally.
Because, I mean, I figure if you plopped one of us down in the middle of the classroom right now, we probably would not be able to differentiate between like how competent they are versus their performance with a language because we just don't know them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any other thoughts or questions from this chapter? Okay then.
On to the article about Common Core standards.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I've never really thought about how, it seems obvious, but like how tied those two are. Just the way things can be phrased. And yes.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like we always use like the Common Core standards like in assignments and like while you're doing lesson plans. But then I've never really like read about the Common Core standards. I've just looked at them physically.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what did you all have to pick out? Was it just us, or
I
did
think
you all have
this
to
is
pick out
all actually.
like a standard to look at?
I just they gave me some of the grade 5 standards to look at, and I was specifically going over Language Without Borders. The idea that language isn't just a code; it's a method that we use to convey and express ourselves in our relation to other things and people and ideas. It's and there were like 4 different ways of language. The first was like physical, how we communicate like through our body rhythm and our movement and our facial expressions and our body expressions. So that part wasn't even verbal. The second was how we use language to relate to the world around us. The third was how we use language to relate socially to other people and situations. And the fourth was like cultural, how we use language to help us define history, culture, and traditions. And so like reading through that section a couple times and then looking at the Common Core standards for grade 5 was just such a stark contrast, because the Common Core standards were almost completely grammatical, whereas none of this Language Without Borders part that I had read mentioned grammar at all as like centrally important to what language is and how we use it outside of the academic context. And it just got me thinking about different ways that I had seen either the Common Core approach or the Language Without Borders approach throughout my education. As a 7th grader, did you guys have to like structure sentences, like graph them out in trees? We had to do that in 7th grade, and it was completely based on like, you had to know like nouns versus adjectives versus like verbs, and I struggled really hard with it. I still don't understand that kind of stuff. Whereas in one of my community college classes, we spent an entire period learning the difference between what feeling words were versus other types of words. Because like he started us out with, I need everybody to give me a word about how they feel right now, or like how do you feel today? And so he wrote everybody's words up on the board, and he like circled some and crossed out others, like these are not feeling words. Like these are words describing other things, but they're not describing how you feel. And it's just really interesting to see misconceptions even about like how we can express ourselves incorrectly without knowing it. But yeah, it was basically just highlighting the idea that language isn't a code, and these Common Core standards aren't always going to match up with what your students are needing or trying to convey or whatnot. And so it was kind of like you sometimes do have to look past the grammatical to like, do they understand? Like, yes, that comma is in the wrong place and that sentence is backwards, but are they trying to convey the concept? Do they understand that plate tectonics is what, drives a lot of Earth processes? Like, do they understand it?
Right.
So that was a lot of what Language Without Borders was like, you do have to go past the grammatical sometimes.
When I feel like, to bring it back to the testing and stuff, like the tests are focused on the grammar, from what I remember. I think, I don't know if like the newer ones are more about, what's the word for, like understanding the concept, analyzing what's happening, something like that. I don't know, but I remember a lot of like the English part of those state tests was the grammar and fixing the sentence.
Because I think for one of my tests, I don't remember which one it was, but it was a state test, and you had to write an essay, but the prompt was just like, what's your favorite season and why?
Yeah.
So
the content didn't matter.
No.
It was just that you were writing well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Did you guys' classes ever have days where you spent on like reading other works, knowing what they were graded, and like seeing how they were graded, like specifically preparing for those tests? Like, we spent entire days doing it.
Yeah, we did that all the time.
Yeah, and you look at it and he'd tell you the score, and he'd be like, well, they lost like blank points for grammar, but they got like all the conceptual points even though it's poorly written, or like this one was like had great grammar but like lost points for competency, like didn't really answer the prompt at all type deal. Spent like entire days on that, which is awful.
interesting scale of like, I don't know.
Well, that's why it's been interesting too. Like, in the other ELL class that you're in with me, when it's kind of like, well, however you interpret it, or it's not really wrong to say, to use a double negative, and it's not really wrong to say, oh, what's that one, like, could I care, or I can't care any less, or I could care less, because that one drives me nuts, and she's like, it doesn't really matter, because that's how people say it. And I'm like, it does matter. I think that the grammar is important. And it's just very interesting to, like, really read deeper into it and really ask myself, like, is it more important that they're using commas right, or that they're understanding? Like, is proficiency in the grammar, or is it, like, where does proficiency in English stand?
There was this, was it a little girl in the chapter, like she was writing something, and the way she was writing, you could understand it, but it wasn't grammatically correct. It was, does anybody remember that part? And the teacher, she wanted her student to reach this certain point where her grammar was well written and, that her word would be legible, but I don't remember the way she approached it was not like by outright telling that student, you're wrong here. It was more like a guiding to her towards wanting to improve her writing, which is good. It was chapter 3 or chapter 4. I don't remember.
I know I read it. I just can't think of it.
And then the video. We definitely touched on a lot of the challenges that the ELL students had, and like one that I think I saw JD wrote about it too, and I'm sure we all touched on it, was just that like the isolation is like so negative. Like they take all the ELL students and like, okay, you guys sit over here, and it just like, and it's bad because then they don't get to hear like native speaking if they're like in a different classroom, and it's like obviously it's good at some points to like take them out and have like a specialist, but when it's too much, then they're not able to like learn to like the best standard.
I think the other part that really stuck out to me when he was talking about the Common Core standards a little bit, because a lot of those standards are about like really explaining your reasoning. So it's difficult enough like to reach a certain solution in a math problem, but then to have to like explain your reasoning, that's hard to do in English.
Right.
And then to be like an ELL student and have to do this hard work in a subject and then have to explain your reasoning in a language that you don't understand, like that would be so challenging.
Right.
That part really, like I listened to that a couple times and I was like, I never even put it in that context, but that's huge because that's a lot of what you have to do is just explain constantly.
Right. And then I was thinking like, I don't know, this could be a money question, but like in your English class, if you're like, if the math teacher is like, okay, this ELL student isn't really like able to like do these math problems, like are you going to start teaching like math words in English? Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, would you start tying in like math into like your English class just so that they could be able to succeed in like their math class?
So like finding ways to connect English into other subjects.
Exactly. Yeah, like if they're like, okay, like they're not understanding like what these like simple terms are, like division and math, and like, and so I think just like as English teachers, we like should be kind of ready to like be knowledgeable about all subjects, since English is like the core of everything.
Right.
Which is scary because I hate math and I'm so bad.
I mean, if you're able to adapt it, that would be great because then your students could see how that's directly applied. But it probably would be harder if you like are in a middle school maybe, and then you would have to actually interact with the colleagues. And I don't know how willing they might be to change their curriculum for you,
Right.
rather than you yourself adapting it.
Well, as we saw in the chapter, like there were plenty of teachers that were not willing to adopt their style.
Right.
Well, as elementary teachers, we'll have to teach all subjects anyway, so I think it'd be easier for us to integrate.
Yeah. I definitely noticed like that this course and like the other ELL courses I feel like are a little bit more geared towards elementary ed. When as I'm trying to be like secondary, I've had a little bit of a struggle trying to like connect these classes with secondary, because I'm like, I feel like all of these things, obviously like some ELL students will still struggle with ELL, like when they're older, but I feel like a lot of it is mostly talked about like when they're younger.
Yeah,
The
this is
difference between those like potential like long-term language learners.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because isn't it because they would rather start when you're younger rather than
Yeah.
like reach a point where it's like, oh, we missed the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Lots of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys better raise them right before they get to me.
I pinpointed the idea of academic language offering a further barrier toward achieving standards in like the structure and wording and learning of English. Because if you think about it, when you get interviewed for like an article, you think you sound fine when you're talking, but then they quote you and you read it and you're like, I sound like an idiot. Because you're used to like reading an academic language and it's so different than the way we speak.
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling and maddening at the same time. But the fact that, like the way schools are oriented toward academic language is so different than the vernacular, it linked it back to me for that, the grammatical competency versus the communicative competency, where, I mean, this person might be able to, due to school, like, write stuff down the way their teachers want to, but they might not understand how to go to a fast food restaurant and order food.
That's what was interesting in reading about Yvonne's teaching when she was teaching a Spanish class and wanted to make the phrases that they were saying more applicable to their lives, and then kind of getting in trouble for changing the curriculum, for saying like something that a kid would actually say rather than whatever.
And the difference wasn't that much. Like the book said, like, I like meatballs. And then, like, the thing she changed it to is, like, I want a cheeseburger without onions on it. Like, something that a student would actually say, and she got in trouble for that, even though it's, like, this is so relevant to what they want to learn or need to learn.
And even if, like, at first they're kind of misusing phrases, like, they're still practicing. In my opinion, I would think that you're still practicing the language, and you'll make those corrections as you go.
Right.
Because you think of, like, a child first learning English, like if you ever listen to a toddler speak, everything they say is wrong. You know, you just kind of have to, but you have to build from something that you can apply to your life.
Helps with practice.
Exactly.
And repetition, like that video I watched where the teacher was always like, repetition. Like, when they pronounce it wrong, she'd repronounce it and then have them say it, even though like sometimes there's, oh yeah, okay. And she'd be like, no, say it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool.
Bouncing off the video, I also like just how she was able to engage all her students in everything. Just they weren't sitting still. They were never, and maybe it was because it was a demonstration, but like they were never just sitting quietly, like alone for a really long period of time. There was always something that would, like, they would be able to connect with that was happening. Also, I liked like that she took out the feather duster. It was so funny.
She was super cool. It'd be interesting to like be able to like sit in on like a couple consecutive classes with her, or like come back throughout the year. Take like the student she gets at the beginning of the year, or I mean like you do with any new group, how they're all kind of segmented and like see them in the middle of the year and then at the end. See their group. Yeah.
And that was anyway, I lost my thought.
Anything else you want to talk about?
How many questions do we have? 3? Oh, okay. Sweet.
Cool.
Well,
We can talk about our spotlight stuff now.
Right. Yes.
Spotlight.
Bye, video.